So with that, I want to talk about Chief Justice Mccormick and Chief Prosecuting Attorney Ellie Zabat. And, you know, I haven't known Ellie as long as I have Bridget, but I have come to know Ellie, and I'm proud of him for running for elected office and winning. That's awesome, Ellie, and congratulations on that. But the thing I wanted both of you to know is that these two folks are eminently accessible. I'm not saying you're going to pick up the phone and dial their cell number, but I will tell you that Ellie has been a part of our advisory board since Dawn Blackburn, one of our advisory board members, brought him to the table. And I'm glad she did that, Ellie. Bridget McCormick was with me not long after my son died at Angelo's, which is an amazing breakfast place for those of you who aren't from Ann Arbor. She was with me telling me that her community, our community, Washtenaw County, needed FAN in it. And that if we pursued FAN in Washtenaw County, that she would open every door that she could. And she did that. And the reason I had access to people, incredible people like Judge Joe Burke and the now retired Judge Charlie Pope, and is because of Bridget McCormick. And to show you how people helping each other and caring matters, when Judge Burke and Judge Pope found out that we wanted to do yoga, they said, wow, you know, the person that helps me run this court is a yoga instructor. And Judge Burke said, my parole officer is a yoga instructor. How about I make that connection? That was the birth of Yoga for Recovery. And the way you get things done is you try to connect with people who care like you do. And the message that I'm here to tell all of you who I'm thankful that you're zooming in is that our two guest speakers today care. I mean, they really do. And they're not charging us a penny like some of the other people I have to negotiate with to get them to be our guest speakers. So with that, the title of today's discussion is Recovery in the Courts, How Our Criminal Justice System is Shaping Addiction. And before I turn it over to Ellie, who's going to lead things off, I want to share with you a quick story about one of our guest speakers from a few months ago. Excuse me one second. Was Dr. Lynn Hankis, who is one of the preeminent addiction physicians in the United States. He headed up the program for doctors when it's discovered that they have an addiction. And he also headed up the program for pilots when they have an addiction. And I was introduced to Dr. Hankis through Captain Lyle Prowse, who was another amazing guest speaker that we were fortunate to have last year on a Zoom call. Anyway, where I'm going with this is I wanted Dr. Hankis to talk about the what makes those programs so efficacious. The physician program, the pilot program. We're talking about an 80 to 90% success rate at curbing relapses, okay? And Dr. Hankis said, you know, that doesn't really excite me because there aren't many, and I'm paraphrasing. I'm not quoting Dr. Hankis, but what he said was, the problem with the way that people typically are treated in inpatient and outpatient clinics is that there's three things that don't happen. And Mario, there's only one entity, or I don't know if Lynn said there was one, but there aren't many entities in the United States that are willing to do it. It's called follow-up, 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 post-discharge. And the thing that Dr. Hankis followed up with, and this is where it dovetails into our talk today, he said the entity that does it the best, that has data to back it up, are the sobriety courts. And he said they happen to have a carrot and a stick, but it works, and they follow up. They don't just turn people loose and leave that cocoon that is out inpatient or outpatient therapy to fend for yourself. So I just wanted to share that story with you, and then introduce Ellie Zabat. Ellie, do you reside in our community?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
born and raised in Ann Arbor, and I
Okay.
got to reside here to get elected. So
I know Bridget's on the west side of Ann Arbor. She's so far west that I wasn't sure that it was still Ann Arbor, but it is still Ann Arbor out there, Bridget. Okay. So
It's Scioto Township, but it's Ann Arbor Public Schools. So
okay,
yeah.
awesome. So look, Ellie Zabat, why don't you talk about some of the amazing stuff that you're doing, and maybe start off, Ellie, with your vision. Why do you think you got elected, and what are you doing about it? What are some of the cool programs that you're bringing to the fore that we should talk about?
Sure, absolutely. And first and foremost, it's great to be here. It's great to be here with Chief Justice Mccormick, who's been really a leader in rethinking how the courts treat addiction since well before I got into office. So we're really following in her footsteps and building on the work that she's done statewide here in Washtenaw County. The other thing that I want to emphasize is I'm going to talk a fair amount about work that we've been doing in the prosecutor's office, but it's important to note that none of what we do alone. The prosecutor is a key actor in the criminal legal system. They are an actor that has a lot of discretionary power as to whether a case gets charged and how it proceeds, but we are far from the only actor, and there's so many great partners that we're working alongside in Washtenaw County: service providers, law enforcement, our courts, our public defender's office, that have allowed us to really build systems that move away from a criminalization focus when we're talking about substance use and really towards a more health-informed approach. So that's the preface. And now to answer your question, Mario. So my background is really more as a public interest civil rights lawyer. I worked in Detroit city government, though I'm born and raised in Ann Arbor. So Washtenaw County is my home. And what I ran for prosecutor on is an idea that we have gone too far in the direction of criminalization, and it has caused a lot of harm. I think unintentionally so in a lot of cases, but it has caused harm nonetheless. The United States of America has an incarceration rate that is by far the highest in the world. It's not even close. And if more incarceration made us safer, you would expect the United States to be the safest country in the world, but we're not, which demonstrates that incarceration and punishment and criminalization isn't the answer to everything. Now, look, I'm a prosecutor, so I want to be clear about this. Of course, if you're engaging in violence, right, if you pose an imminent danger to the community, if you're harming others, those are cases that we are going to prosecute, and in appropriate cases, we'll seek to send you to jail or to prison because, in some cases, that's what we need to do to keep the community safe. But let's talk about substance use. We have not, through the war on drugs, through the criminalization of substance use, made a real dent in addiction or in substance use in the United States of America. And that's because we're never going to punish our way out of drug use. It just doesn't work. And in many cases, it's counterproductive. The reason for that is when you are charged with a crime, related to substance use or anything else, and you get a conviction, you might go to jail for a little while, you might get probation, right? But what you're going to have on your record is that criminal conviction, which can make it harder to get housing, to secure employment, to continue educational opportunities. And ironically, those are the very things that prevent recidivism and that prevent people from relapse. I know Families Against Narcotics, and Mario, you were talking about this earlier. So much of the work that you do is around engaging people, in a positive and healthy way. Well, if you've got a criminal record, that can be a lot harder because it's much harder to engage people if they don't have a place to live, if they've been denied housing because of a criminal record, if they don't have a job and they can't support themselves, if they've got restrictions around who they can be around, which is often something that comes with a criminal record as well. So what we're working on doing together with all of our partners here in Washtenaw County is building off-ramps in the criminal legal system so that we can get folks the help, the treatment, the rehabilitative plan that they need, and ideally to do so without saddling that person with a criminal record that can hold them back for years into the future. So I want to sort of talk, and I know Bridget's going to talk about the problem-solving courts, so I'm not going to dwell too much on that. Those are a major part of the sort of menu of options that we have in Washtenaw County. But what we're trying to do is build out systems that provide those off-ramps with as light a touch as possible, depending on the circumstance. So I want to start with one thing, a couple of policies that we have. So we generally do not charge people under several policies that I put into place upon taking office with certain types of drug offenses, those being cannabis, which is legal now anyway, entheogenic plants, but also importantly, Suboxone, buprenorphine. And the reason for that is because we know that Suboxone, the buprenorphine, is a medicine that many people are taking not to get high, but to manage their addiction, to get better. It can still be a felony if you're using it without a prescription. And to be clear, I think it should be taken as part of a supervised program with a prescription from a doctor. But we know from data and research that the choice, if somebody is using Suboxone, is using buprenorphine without a prescription, is not between that and not using anything at all, not between that and total sobriety, but it's often going to be between that and fentanyl or heroin. And when we discourage people from opting for Suboxone, from potentially sharing a life-saving medication with somebody who needs it, overdose is far more likely. We put this policy into place in January, but we didn't do it without research or data. Chittenden County, Vermont, which is where Burlington is, which is a state and a community that's been really hard hit by the opioid epidemic, they put into place a similar policy with the chief prosecutor there and the chief of police working together. And the year after they did it, overdose rates fell by 50%. They were cut in half. So what we're trying to do is not impose further harm, not discourage people from using a life-saving alternative, a medicine, even if they don't have a prescription, knowing that the alternative to that may be an overdose. So those are some of the policies that we put into place around charging. Now, moving up in the chain. So we're just not charging that. Sheriff Jerry Clayton with Community Mental Health, the Public Defender's Office, and a variety of community partners has been working for a few years on a program called LEAD, which stands for Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion and Deflection. And this is a model that was pioneered out in King County in Seattle, Washington, has had really positive effects. And the idea there is if an officer sees somebody who doesn't pose an imminent public safety threat, but is dealing with a behavioral health issue, a substance use issue, a mental health issue, rather than arresting them, rather than submitting charges to our office for prosecution, what they're asked to do instead, there's one simple ask of them. We want to connect you to treatment. We want to connect you to help. And we're hoping that you'll go down the right path. And if you do that and we don't see you again, there's no need to impose criminal charges. So working, with our partners, LEAD has started in Washtenaw County in 2021. It's really going to get off the ground in 2022. We've got a lead prosecutor, and her job is, if a case is submitted to us, we just hold it. We never authorize the charges, because if we can get somebody into a program, get them connected to treatment, get them connected to help, without ever arresting, without ever filing a criminal charge, we've done our job. We've gotten that person back on the right path, and there's no need to saddle them with even an arrest or with being charged or with a criminal record. Now, that's not going to work for everybody. So, I told you sort of the steps up that we have. Sometimes people do need that carrot and that stick, and problem-solving courts are one really important part of that. One of the issues, and this is under state law, so it's not any issue with the problem-solving courts per se, but one shortfall sometimes of a problem-solving court for certain classes of defendants is you got to plead guilty to a crime to get into a problem-solving court. And for folks that are non-citizens, a guilty plea can, in and of itself, even if we're dismissing the case later, that can result in deportation, or a loss of their immigration status. For many people, even a guilty plea can result in the loss of a job, loss of housing, and can disrupt their lives, even if that case is going to be dismissed at the back end. So we said, working with the probation department in Ann Arbor in 15th District Court, which has been just a fantastic partner on this, we said, well, what if we were around the clock a little bit? What if we connected people to treatment and to resources and to an individualized plan, but we allowed them to access that before they ever pleaded guilty? And so we launched the first, as far as I'm aware, the first ever pre-plea diversion program in the state of Michigan in Ann Arbor's 15th District Court this May. And what happens there is, you're arrested, a charge is filed, right? So it's a step up from lead, but we offer you the opportunity. We say, look, we're going to hold these charges. You don't even have to plead guilty. What we're going to do is we're going to connect you with treatment and with resources and with an individualized plan so that you can get back on the right track. And if you complete that plan, and if you stay out of trouble over a 6-month period, we're going to dismiss the charge without you ever having to plead guilty, so you don't face those collateral consequences of conviction. So we started this in May. And I'm so proud of this program. It's being run, I think Allison Robbins, I saw her on the call. So Allison, I'm going to shout you out. Allison's our lead prosecutor, and she also runs this program in 15th District Court. And she's done a fantastic job on this. Let me tell you the numbers. We have, at this point, had 51 participants when I talked to Allison last week in this pilot program in Ann Arbor. We have over a 98% success rate, meaning that 98% of the people have either completed the program or are on track to complete the program without any new arrest. And they're also doing all the things in their plan. So this is something that works. We don't need to be heavy-handed with these types of cases necessarily. If we give people that off-ramp, they're taking advantage of it. And the numbers are important because we always want to know what works. And 98%, it used to be 100% up until like a month ago, but nothing's ever perfect. 98% is pretty good, but the stories are even more impactful. And I'll just tell you one. These are the types of cases that we get in here. We had a guy that was housing insecure and that was going through the trauma of divorce, and he was in recovery. But he slipped, as people sometimes do, and he got charged with shoplifting a bottle of wine from a store here. We offered him the opportunity for a pre-plea diversion, and he completed every single thing that he was asked to do. He got back into a treatment plan. He's now in transitional housing at Don Farm. His case is going to be dismissed this week, but more importantly, he's also just doing great. He's reestablished connections with his children, right? And his relationship with them is improving. Again, he's been able to get housing, which is something that even a guilty plea might have prevented him from doing. He made a mistake. He slipped up. People slip up. But if we can give them the off-ramp, if we can allow them to succeed, give them the opportunity to succeed, and we still have the stick. Look, if you screw up, we'll move forward with charges in the traditional course. But we're giving people the opportunity. They're taking advantage of it. And so many of them are thriving. And so we're, I think the pilot program there has been a real success, and we're going to look to replicate that program in district courts across the county, hopefully this year. And we're going to be reaching out to our partners on that. But probation in 15th has just been a phenomenal resource.
Hey, Ellie, if somebody wants to learn more about that, if you get us a link to somewhere on your website, we can publish that on our website. Or how does somebody go about learning more other than going to our website? Is there something Allison or somebody can send in the chat feature? And if not, don't worry about it. I'll make sure word gets out about it. Okay.
I will drop a link in the chat. But you know what? Actually, I think this is a good time to turn it over to Chief Justice Mccormick while I look for that. While I look for the right link, because the next step up is problem-solving courts, and I we're using them. They're going great in Washtenaw County, but it's really something that the Chief Justice has been a tremendous advocate and trailblazer on. So I want to give her the opportunity at this point, and then maybe I can finish up with a couple of the other things we're doing in Washtenaw County. If that sounds good.
Yeah, and we've got questions coming in that we'll address at the end. But Chief Justice McCormick.
Well, thanks so much for inviting me to be part of this conversation, and thanks for all you both do for our community. One of the reasons I live in Washtenaw is because people like Mario give all of his time and heart to making our community healthier and better. And people like Ellie Zabat run for office, and as you just heard, make an incredible difference in what we can do for one another. Accountability and healing are not inconsistent. And if you elect the right leaders and you have people in your community like Mario, you can show the world what can be done. And it really does require leaders. And so we're really lucky in Washtenaw to have a number of them. And Ellie's right, I don't know how much of it he could get done alone. It does depend on partners. But I'm going to talk to you a little bit about problem-solving courts across the state and the nation, so you understand how what a long history now these programs have, and how it's time to start thinking about taking it to the next level, which Ellie's already doing here in Washtenaw, but I would like to see that happen throughout the state. Michigan has, as of today, 204 problem-solving courts. Those include drug courts, sobriety courts, mental health treatment courts, veterans treatment courts. The veterans treatment courts are often responding to people who have mental health and addiction issues. And obviously people who are not veterans also often have more than one problem. But in all of our problem-solving courts, the focus is on providing treatment and support, and pretty intense supervision as an alternative to incarceration. The first problem-solving courts were the result of a few brave judges about 30 years ago who saw the same people showing up on their dockets, and they would take their guilty pleas and send them off to jail or even prison. And like most people who go to jail and prison, they would be released and the judges would see them again. And a few brave judges said, it's not working. What we're doing is not working. we can keep doing it, but it's not making, it's not helping them get better. People who had addiction issues and mental health issues, behavioral health issues, and it's therefore not making our communities safer. So let's try something else. And at that time, this, it was a different moment, right? So when I say they were brave judges 30 years ago, for judges to say, we're going to do something different, we're going to support people with treatment instead of incarceration, that was brave at that time. And it took a while to collect data to be able to show the world that it worked. The Supreme Court's administrative office supports all of those courts throughout the state, the 204 problem-solving courts, in their management, with training, with education, with operational standards and certification and funding. The funding in fiscal year 2022 was $17 million that we provided. Throughout the pandemic, the problem-solving courts, like the rest of courts, had to continue to figure out a way to maintain what they were doing and keep people safe. So they moved a lot of their meetings onto remote platforms. We're still gathering some data about how that turned out. It's kind of important for us to figure out so that we make sure that those problems continue to be successful. Like you heard about in Washtenaw County, we couldn't do all we are doing throughout the state. I should say Michigan has more veterans treatment courts than any state in the country, and we're close in the other areas. But we're very grateful for our partners across state government. Every governor for the last 4 and the legislature repeatedly have been committed to supporting our problem-solving courts. They're always open to our pitch for additional funding, additional ideas for problem-solving courts. We're still working a little bit on tweaking that legislation that Ellie talked about, but it can be done. There used to be some misconception about problem-solving courts being some easy way out, and I'm here to tell you there is nothing easy about accepting a problem-solving court option. In fact, they demand so much of participants that anyone who has successfully completed one has really had to dig deep and show incredible resolve and focus. The best indicators of their success are in the data. Like you heard from Ellie in his pre-plea treatment court model, I guess you would call it. We regularly see and keep good data on recidivism rates, which are significantly lower for graduates of problem-solving courts than regular criminal dockets. We keep data on employment rates, which are significantly higher for graduates of problem-solving courts than regular criminal dollars. And there have even been some great academic studies on the way problem-solving courts save taxpayer dollars because people are employed and not committing new crimes when they finish these programs. Our adult drug court graduates are 2 times less likely to be convicted of a new offense within 3 years of admission to a drug court program. Sobriety court graduates 3 times less likely. The drop in unemployment across all treatment courts is 96%. Mental health graduates are 3 times less likely to commit another crime within 3 years of admission. And among the mental health court graduates, 97% show improved mental health status and improved quality of life at the end of their time in the program. The model has been working successfully in courts for a long time, and as both Ellie and Mario said, there's something unique about a court because there is always a carrot and a stick, right? The judge has, if it doesn't work out, the judge has a guilty plea from somebody, and they can always go to jail or prison, depending on what the charge was. So that's a pretty big stick, and the carrot's pretty big as well. If it does work out, the criminal conviction is often dismissed or dramatically reduced, and often people have a job and a whole new lease on life. So it's a unique position. But the legislature has gotten more interested in figuring out diversion programs to help counties build out options as an alternative to jail even earlier. So in the 2022 state budget, signed in October, a little bit late in the process, the legislature created a behavioral health diversion grant to help counties build out their resources. They funded it with $5 million at that time. There's another 15 million moving through the legislature right now in a supplemental, which fingers crossed, I'm gonna knock on wood, but I believe it's gonna be passed early this year. And there are right now 2 bills, Senate Bill 637 and 638, which codify that grant fund into a statute and add additional guidance around best practices and metrics. The legislature passed it with overwhelming bipartisan support in December, and the governor signed it on December 16th. So there is momentum and interest around the model of supporting people and giving them the tools to succeed. I also happen to sit on the National Association of Drug Court Professionals board, and the NADCP is the premier training, membership, and advocacy organization for the treatment court model around the country. And I thought it was worth giving you a few of those numbers. There are now 4,000 programs found in every state, 4 territories, and over 20 countries. NADCP was founded in 1994 and has a drug court division, a DWI court division, and the Justice for Vets division. And we've trained literally hundreds of thousands of professionals in legal, clinical, psychosocial, and law enforcement to support drug courts throughout the country. And drug courts is treatment courts, really. We also are involved in asking Congress for more money. If this is, if spending money at the front end by giving people the support they need saves money at the back end, it's actually a pretty easy argument to make. So we make it here in the state legislature, and NADCP makes it in Congress. The Conference of Chief Justices also has just finished a national task force on the opioid crisis and put together toolkits for supporting programs like the one you've heard Ellie has gotten off the ground with a real running start here in Washington. I could go on and on, but I feel like we're already eating up a lot of the time. So why don't I take a beat and see if there are questions or
we've got, we've got time to continue, you guys, but we've got loads of comments and questions. So
okay, so let me stop talking and answer.
Yeah, I want to start though with this comment. Drug court is absolutely hardcore! Exclamation point. I've heard that. I was also a drug court client, very tough, very intensive. I have been in recovery since before I started, but I will say the skills learned during that time in my life were essential for my continued success. And so, I can tell you the court folks with whom I've had the honor of getting to know over the last 3.5 years are just incredible people. They care like the two of you do. It might not seem like it when it's that part of your life, but you guys have to trust me. They get it, they care, they're actively involved. And I before I get to the questions, I'll tell you our yoga instructors, one used to help Judge Pope with his sobriety court, and the other one is the probation officer for Judge Joe Burke out of Ann Arbor. They wouldn't be doing that if they didn't care. Jen Harding, thank you for your comment. Let's scroll back up to the top. Let me scroll down here. Okay. I love, just a comment, I love this attitude, new thinking regarding moving away from criminalization. This is fantastic. Thank you, Ellie. What are the laws for felonies dropping off a record after a certain amount of time? The likes of which Gretchen Whitmer put into place. You guys, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Ellie.
so I can I can take that one because it's another thing that we're doing in Washtenaw County. In April of this year, a new law went into effect that allows for expungement of old criminal records, and depending on the type of crime, the waiting periods vary, and you can only have so many. You can only have 4 felonies. And there's some crimes that are just not expungable if they're punishable by up to life in prison. So very serious offenses, your armed robberies, your homicides, things like that are not expungable. But a whole host of offenses are expungable, which means that it's off your public record. You don't have to say that you've been convicted of a crime on an employment application, on a housing application, it can still be seen by law enforcement and the like. You don't change the fact that it happened, but for all intents and purposes in public life, it's off your record. This is just a transformative law, and it's so important because so many people made mistakes in the past, or were dealing with substance use or a mental health issue in the past, and have gotten back on the right path. Have stayed out of trouble for years, and yet that old conviction, and it can be decades old, is still holding them back from opportunity. So this law is very important. As of right now, you do have to still apply to get your criminal record cleared, and there's an application process. One thing we've been doing in the prosecutor's office, we've actually got a new unit that affirmatively helps people and connects you for free to pro bono attorneys who can handle your case. And we've been able to, since April, help over 500 Washtenaw County residents on the process of getting their record cleared and get their life back on track. We've got a dedicated unit for dealing with that. And again, this is important, not just, I will drop the link to the new unit. I see that question. This is important, not just from a fairness perspective, because nobody should be defined by the worst thing that they've ever done, but also from a public safety perspective. Because again, getting people access to the things that a criminal record prevents them from getting, jobs and housing and education and the like, those are the things that prevent recidivism. Those are the things that keep us safer in the long term. So the new expungement law is just so important, not just for not defining somebody forever by one brush or two brushes with the law in the past, in the past, but also to make sure they stay on that right path, that they have the resources, and that they don't backslide and ultimately harm public safety.
Okay, we've got a question here. It's kind of a comment and a question. I appreciate that the focus here is rightly placed on the individual user level and how the system, while perhaps is well-intentioned, it too often is a bludgeon that causes more harm than good. However, because many users drift and overlap into trafficking and diversion in order to fund the addiction or more, my question is, how can we go about appropriately differentiating between the victimless, except for self-harm, user and the dealer legally? I would imagine that some cases can't be sifted successfully. What happens in those cases? You want to try that one, Ellie?
Sure. So look, at least from my perspective, I do distinguish between drug trafficking and drug use, and I think a lot of people do. I do think that drug trafficking, particularly when you're dealing dangerous drugs, is something that requires consequences and needs to be discouraged, and the criminal legal system is our way of discouraging that. None of our policies suggest that we're letting drug traffickers off the hook. That said, it is a correct observation that there is not always a easy distinction between somebody who is using drugs and somebody who is dealing them, because quite frequently, the distribution of drugs can be something that somebody is doing to support their addiction. They're not, a kingpin or anything like that. They're not doing it for profit, but they're, distributing to a close network of people so that they can support their own addiction. The very first policy, at least from our perspective, the very first policy that I put in place in the prosecutor's office is really more of an overarching guidance document, which rescinded all the zero tolerance policies that the prosecutor office previously maintained. And at bottom said this: we need to treat every case according to its unique circumstances, because every criminal case that comes into the system involves a unique human story and unique factual circumstances. And this can be the most important thing that is happening in anybody's life, the victim's lives, if there's a victim of a crime, the defendant's lives. It can be life-changing, and everybody should know that it's being treated with the care that it deserves, and we don't just have one-size-fits-all approaches for things. So, despite the fact that on paper, a person who is dealing drugs for profit, dealing dangerous drugs for profit, may look the same on paper, theoretically, as somebody who is just, distributing them to friends to support in addiction, we are going to treat that person who's selling for profit much differently and much harsher in terms of how we proceed with the case and the types of things we'd be willing to consider than somebody that fundamentally has that underlying addiction issue and isn't imposing more harm on the community. Somebody that is selling fentanyl to middle schoolers is not the same from a moral or from a public safety standpoint as somebody that is themselves dealing with substance use and is distributing to a small group of people who were already engaged in substance use before they started getting it from that one person. They're just not, and the right outcomes in the case are going to be very different. And so we instruct our assistant prosecutors, you've got to look at all the facts, you got to look at all the circumstances, and you got to treat it not through a one-size-fits-all approach, but with the care and attention and eye for public safety and possibilities of rehabilitation that it deserves.
Jen, you asked the question, is this why Suboxone is offered while incarcerated and before going home in prison, specifically in Washtenaw County? I can't remember the context there. If you guys can't, I'll have Jen resend that question over. But Jen, do me a favor and resend that, okay? With just the context to your question. Has the explosion of tremendously dangerous synthetic opioids and cannabinoids with lacing of lesser substances, how has this unfortunate evolution impacted the legal response?
You want me to take that again, or?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah.
It's a tremendously concerning development. It just is, and this is where I do think there needs to be distinctions drawn between people who are selling, particularly to unwitting buyers. They believe they're just buying cheaper cannabis and marijuana, not from a regulated store, but from a dealer, and it turns out to be laced with fentanyl. That's somebody, honestly, that I think does need to be held criminally responsible, and because they're pushing something that can and does kill people on unwitting buyers. It is a tremendous concern. Another tremendous concern is we've seen instances where other substances, fentanyl, meth, are made to look like prescription pills, and people buy them. I mean, meth is surging across the country again, which is a very dangerous drug. And in cases that I know of, it appears that it's being packaged like it's Adderall, right, and being sold to unwitting young people. that's, I draw the line short of there, but that's something that's firmly on the other side of the line. If you're doing that, look, I don't care. You got to be held criminally responsible. You got to go to prison, because that's something you're pushing dangerous drugs that can kill people into the community to people that don't know they're taking them. That is a real public safety concern, public health concern. I said at the start, there are the cases where public safety demands a robust criminal response, and those types of cases are absolutely some of those.
For those individuals who have cannabis abuse, the laws do not help them. This substance has deleterious effects for people with CUD, yet is allowed now due to legality. THC is no different than ETOH for some individuals. This is a big loophole, unfortunately, even for those who have CUD. Thanks, and for your thoughts. Ellie?
I'm taking all these. So I don't doubt that there are folks that struggle with whether it's a chemical addiction or not, but a functional addiction to THC and cannabis. There are people that struggle with dependence on a lot of different substances, and that's one of them. So I hear the concern. I share the concern. I think that when people are having issues with dependence on cannabis, that is something that is concerning, and often that can lead to other behaviors. And I'll tell you, with our pre-plea program, we weren't charging somebody with cannabis necessarily, but what was happening is a lot of the people were getting caught up in other stuff. This was a group of young people that were getting caught up in other stuff, and it turns out that they were using cannabis as well as other illicit drugs. So one of the conditions was don't use any sort of illicit drugs, and that included cannabis as sort of their treatment rehabilitative plan. And the probation officer that in 15th district that meets with these folks regularly had a meeting the other week with one of the young women who said, thanks to this program, thanks to this sort of off ramp, I've stopped using cannabis. My mind is much clearer. I'm thinking better. I really like who I am better. And she's sort of being weaned off of it. And so that's, an intervention. If you're seeing other types of behavior that's related or in addition to cannabis use, that there are intervention tools. That said, I do believe, I just firmly believe this, that we haven't done ourselves really any good by trying to criminalize a lot of issues away. And if you look at the history of the war on drugs and how many Black and brown people in particular have been subject to criminal sanctions for cannabis use, for marijuana use, it's just it's a staggering number of people. And a lot of people have historically used cannabis, and frankly, the criminal laws on the books really didn't stop them. If we're being honest, especially in Washington County, I mean, we have a hash bash every April, right? People were using cannabis before it was legalized. People are using it after it's legalized, and I don't think that we've done much good just criminalizing the substance. I don't think it's deterred many people, so as a result, I do think that the legalization is a good thing, but it doesn't fully answer the question of alternative approaches, and we just need to build up supportive services and support systems for those who may have an issue, just like for those who may have an issue with alcohol or any other legal substance.
Here's a question, higher level question. Is there a way to know which courts are problem-solving courts? Bridget, is there something on at your website level that maybe we can get Lynette, or like how would somebody go about searching for that? And we can talk afterward if there's something I can get access to by way of a link or something. By problem solving courts, is there a way for someone to know that?
Yeah, I'm gonna see what's on my, we have a brand new website, and I don't think I've ever seen a map that identifies each problem-solving court, but I'll figure it out and get it to you, Mario.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
And when I get that from Bridget, I'll make sure it's either in my email blast or published on our website. Okay. Thanks for that question. Who sent that? Whoever you were that sent that great question. There, Beth, thank you for sending that. Appreciate it. Okay. I'm in Ottawa County. Are there any over on this side of the state?
There are great problem-solving courts in Ottawa County. Yep.
Okay, so we're gonna get you the information you asked for, since there's now been a couple of people that have asked it. Has a recent law regarding DUIs discouraged the option of sobriety courts? I believe it made the first DUI a civil offense.
It didn't do that. That didn't happen.
Okay.
No, DUI is still a DUI. Yeah.
Okay.
What the commenter might be thinking of is there was a law that made a first DUI offense expungable after a waiting period, but it's still a criminal charge, and you have to wait a while to get that expunged off your record anyway. So it's not a civil offense.
Okay. We've got somebody here in the comments section. I offer specialized therapy for shoplifting, employee theft, and repetitive minor theft. She gives her name, if anybody needs help, go for it. Ellie, can you please provide a link for the expungement of SUD related charges if possible? I will share with my networks. Thanks, Megan O'Neill. And Ellie, you and Bridget are busy answering questions. If you get me stuff, if you've got it at your fingertips, go ahead and put it in the chat feature. But if you hook up with me, in the next few days, I'll make sure it gets published on our website.
Yep, I dropped it. I think I dropped it before, but I am dropping it again.
Oh, there
right
it
now.
is,
So
right there. Link to expungement. Sorry. Yeah. Oh, and she probably got it. There are so many questions and comments. I'm behind you guys, so sorry. Part of the problem is this is a great question. And this probably falls under your realm. Part of the problem is the overprescribing of medication. Is there or why hasn't there been harsher laws for this? For the I don't know if he's referring or she is referring to physicians or out and outright, people who are selling these drugs. I know that the system is going hard after the lowest hanging fruit, you guys, but there's a lot of this going on. And I think the laws are pretty harsh, aren't they? If you get busted doing this sort of thing, over prescribing, or depends on who they're referring to. For physicians, I don't think we're going to answer that here, but
yeah. So certainly, if you're running an illegal pill mill, as they're called, sort of knowingly prescribing medication that ends up being diverted into the black market, that's something that the feds have gone after. I'm aware of several federal prosecutions around those. What I will say actually is that I think a bigger problem historically, frankly, was the culture and the sort of received practices that a lot of doctors were taught for a number of years, and in many ways this was pushed by the drug companies. There was a movement in the medical profession to really take pain seriously, to treat pain as the fifth vital sign. And that was encouraged and bolstered by, look, I oversaw Detroit's lawsuit against the opioid companies in my previous job. So I think I'm on record as saying this anyway, so I'm not saying anything that's too surprising. The Purdue Pharmas of the world, they were pushing this, and they were really encouraging doctors, even doctors that were operating in good faith, to prescribe opioids and in particular OxyContin for a wide variety of maladies that patients had, and they were really hiding the fact that those particular drugs were quite addictive. The song and dance they did for doctors was, actually, we've overstated the addictive power of opioids, and we've got this new time release format that doesn't work with Oxy and everything like that. And you can prescribe these for virtually anything. And not only that, but it's immoral not to, because you should be treating pain as the fifth vital sign. And a generation of doctors, including doctors that operated in good faith, really took that to heart, and they weren't doing anything malicious necessarily. They thought that they were helping their patients because they were getting bad information and pushed out information from these shady groups that were funded by opioid companies that had like benign sounding names and medical sounding names. And so it wasn't all these pill mill doctors that, should appropriately face criminal liability. For a lot of doctors, for a lot of prescribing doctors, they were doing that in good faith because they've been fed lies from the opioid companies that had their own profit motive in mind. So that culture has changed. I know that culture has changed, and there's been a rethinking on how to treat pain in the medical industry. And at the same time, there's these massive lawsuits and a settlement pending against the opioid manufacturers, wholesalers, and retailers, brought by a number of states and cities. Washtenaw County has opted in, the state of Michigan's opted in, and we'll see. I think in Washtenaw County, it's 8.2 million that would come to the county for opioid use.
Washtenaw County, Ellie?
What?
To Washtenaw County?
No, coming to Washtenaw County,
Okay.
more to the city of Ann Arbor, and other jurisdictions have them there too, and a lot will be coming to the state if the settlement is ultimately approved. But that's a sort of history of it, and obviously the pill mill doctors that were intentionally doing this and knew what they were doing, that's a different that's a different beast that have faced federal criminal charges. But a lot of it was just fueled by the opioid industry, and doctors were operating in good faith. But the good news is that I think that thinking has appropriately changed around that. The bad news is that, of course, this led to a tsunami of addiction, which was, if you look at some of the documents, they're public documents in this case, was no accident. These companies knew what they were doing, and we're still dealing with the fallout.
Yeah, much like the tobacco situation.
Exactly.
Before I go on to the next question, just so the person who asked that question, I'm not specifically answering your question about how do we hold those prescribers more accountable. I did want everyone to know on our board of directors is a physician by the name of Dr. Chad Brummett, who is I think he's one of the country's leading experts on the overprescription of opioids. He heads up Michigan Open. They're based in Ann Arbor, affiliated with the University of Michigan. He researches this area, and Dr. Brummett's charge is to educate physicians on, there's a better way and don't quote me on this data point, but, the over majority of the opioids that are scripted aren't used by patients. And I had some surgery about a year ago, almost to the day. And my doctor scripted me 30 opioids. And I think I used 1 or 2. And I got rid of the rest in a safe way. But most of those are diverted back into the community. And that's what Dr. Chad Brummett does. If you want to get in touch with Dr. Brummett, let me know and I can put you in touch with him. This next question might not be a Bridget or Ellie question. It might be one of the parole officers. Or can you please describe a little more regarding who administers treatment in Washtenaw County and how treatment plans are developed? Is it only peer support? The answer to that one is no. Are there social workers involved, psychologists employed by the court, contracting with the court? In my county, individuals are court ordered to find their own therapists, which is very difficult for some folks right now. Amen to that. And I have seen firsthand how it creates a conflict of interest for some independent therapists, i.e. creating treatment plans that are longer than the evidence-based standard of care so they can make more money. So anyway, is that something you guys can answer? Or I can definitely get with somebody who's more grassroots, ground level, Ellie, to answer that. Or when, what do you think?
Yeah, that'd be good.
Okay, I'll do that. Thank you, Ellie. Thanks, Chief Justice. I know of a case, and I'm reading this for the first time. I know in a case in Washtenaw County Jail in which a man waited over a month for substance use treatment because of bottlenecks in the paperwork process. Is there someone I can contact in the prosecutor's office to discuss this in order to help identify the issues in order to expedite treatment for future cases? Boy,
I will drop my email, the prosecutor email in the chat. Send an email to this. Mention that I said to send this email at this forum tonight, and it'll get forwarded to me. I'll send it along to the right person in the office, if indeed there's somebody that's assigned to that case, and we'll look into it. So
yeah,
go ahead and do that, and I'll get on this as soon as possible.
And to the person, to David, who sent that, one of the things that Washtenaw Fan tries to do is help get people placed. Oftentimes, if the person is a resident of Washtenaw County and has Medicaid as their primary form of insurance, we're hamstrung by the system, and that there are only 2 inpatient rehab clinics in our community. Both have a lack of beds, so it's hard, but there are instances where you can apply to get into an inpatient clinic in a different county. So, but that can be, that can involve some red tape. But David, if you reach out to us when those situations happen at Washtenaw Fan, that's kind of what we try to do, is help get people connected with resources, reliable resources, as quickly as possible. Okay, what is being done or in the works for those leaving prison who have used opioids to help them avoid return to use and possible overdosing, especially with fentanyl? Is Suboxone, buprenorphine being offered to people in jail or prison currently?
So yeah.
Sorry, I was muted. That's kind of beyond my expertise.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's we don't run jails or prisons, so I do know that there's a lot of work in the jail and in the sheriff's office. The sheriff's office runs the jail in Washtenaw County, and then Michigan Department of Corrections runs the prisons. I know that reentry is something that the sheriff and a lot of us in Washtenaw County are really concerned with. We've got a sort of working group that's set up with a wide variety of stakeholders. I am not sure, honestly, whether and under what circumstances Suboxone is used either in jail or in prisons. It's not something that we that we run, but I do know that reentry is really something that's of concern to a lot of local stakeholders.
I will add to what Ellie said. We are currently involved in talking with the MDOC about providing peer recovery coaching and other services to people who are released from prison, come back to Washtenaw County, overdose. Washtenaw County has a very high rate of recidivism in that regard, and the MDOC is on it and wants to work with us to do something about it. In fact, I have a meeting tomorrow with the Washtenaw County Sheriff Office to discuss their interest in partnering with us in that regard. I'll fill everybody in on that in greater detail once I learn more. How do the new expungement laws apply to getting a driver's license back? Does any time statute get waived when getting a license back if the individual has been sober well past the timelines outlined in the court documents? Add in, and this is where it gets complicated, type 1 diabetes. At 3 years of sobriety, which is a great accomplishment, a license is essential to gain back independence. Your advice is appreciated. What's involved in getting your license back, you guys?
So that's within the Secretary of State's jurisdiction, and so there's not really that much of an overlap between the criminal system and the Secretary of State's office. I do know that there recently, because certain reasons for which you might get a suspended license, such as non-payment of traffic fines and the like. The legislature did change that law, recognizing that can lead to a cycle of poverty. If you didn't have the money to pay for your traffic fines, and then you get your license suspended, and then you're in court on a criminal charge for driving a suspended license, and then you lose your job. I mean, it's a downward spiral. And as part of that, the Secretary of State is reinstating a number of licenses. So that is something that's going on. I believe, though I'm outside of my lane a little bit here, Bridget, maybe you know, I believe that's supposed to be automatic, and there were notices mailed out to a number of people, but it really is the Secretary of State's jurisdiction. So I'd reach out to them.
Yeah, the legislation that was enacted in last December went into effect October 1st. And the Secretary of State automatically reinstated almost 300,000 people's driver's licenses, but they were all related to fines and fees, or the non-payment of fines and fees. So beyond that, it is a Secretary of State process.
Okay. Just a comment, another huge issue involves corrections officers who bring illicit drugs into the system, your system. If you're helping those coming out in incarceration, the correction officers who spend a huge amount of time with inmates should have some sort of social services degree. I will tell you that when I talk with the Washtenaw County Sheriff Office, they say that they are resigned to being social workers in terms of helping people. So I don't know. It's not really a question. I'm going to move on. Somebody apologized for asking so many questions. Don't do that. Bridget sent some links to everybody. So did Ellie. Let me make sure I get to some of these questions. I am a part of the mill culture. It hits me right home. Boy, so this is a long one, a long comment. As a psychiatrist, Ellie is spot on, correct on the systemic miseducation of healthcare professionals fomented by Purdue, the Sacklers, and others as a turning point for the opioid epidemic. I can tell you, I've seen Dr. Brummett talk, and the first thing Chad says is, look, I was prescribing these, but there's a better way. So it's the tide is turning. Dr. Brummett has data points on the number of opioids being scripted is heading the right way. It's heading south. So want everybody to know that. Ellie's got his email address there. Zabat, be careful for what you wish for with that one. Okay. Homeless shelters. Chippewa County has 0 housing for anyone coming home from prison, no homeless shelters. It's a huge problem because these people come right back to Washtenaw County to prison from a lack of support. We need help. Okay. SOS has their own procedure for license reinstatement, but after 3 years of sobriety, the person should indeed apply for reinstatement. Exclamation point. There is a process listed on the Secretary of State website. And I will tell everybody that's coming from someone who really knows. So make note of that. And to the person that asked that question regarding your loved one and his 3 years of sobriety, and I actually know the person that asked that question, and I'd be happy to help facilitate that if I can. Lastly here, the courts are working with individuals to try to get their license back beyond SOS, automatic expungements. That's from Elaine Washington. Is that, why does that name?
That's Judge Washington.
That's Judge Washington, who, please, Judge Washington, we've never met. I'd love to meet you. And I've actually participated, I used to, at one point, in Judge Pope's like pre-session to going out in front of everybody. And look, I want to meet you, Judge Washington. Thank you for zooming in. And okay, here's, boy, if anyone would like to pick the brain of an addict, convict, or someone who has got it together and kept it together so far, she put her email address out there. I'll tell you, Jen, you got to come to our meeting on February 22nd at the Michigan Theater. I don't know if you're local to Washtenaw County, but it's going to be incredible. So we've got one more question here. Well, quickly, can Justice McCormick go back over the funding she mentioned in legislator and in the legislator office? Again, I missed how that will impact our local criminal legal system and SUD treatment locally.
I assume you were not asking about the funding for problem-solving courts, but the 2022 funding that the legislature created, the Behavioral Health Diversion Grant Fund. The purpose of that fund is to help counties build out their resources to support people in crisis as alternatives to jail. It was originally funded with $5 million, but there's 15 million more working its way through in a supplemental. And I don't think, I mean, there are some, the new statute is going to have some basically best practices and guidelines, but the idea for the fund is they're looking for innovations. And honestly, I don't know a better place for innovations than Washtenaw County, where you have a prosecutor like this one and a sheriff like Jerry Clayton, and you have a committed group of leaders who are willing to try new things that work. So hopefully.
And you did address the right area. The person responded in the chat feature.
Great.
Okay, you guys, that's it. That was some spirited Q&A. Yeah, it would be amazing if there's a system process that could place those needing treatment now. This is what Hope Not Handcuffs does. Dawn is correct. For those of you who want to learn more about that fan offered program, go to the corporate fan website. They're located in Macomb County. Just search Hope Not Handcuffs. I mean, it's the branding's out there now for it. And all you have to do is say, I need help. And our corporate fan chapter connects you with resources you need. Dawn, thank you for bringing that up. You can call Hope Line. A lot of good stuff here. Brandon, let me ask you a quick question before we end the call. First, is there a way to save all these phenomenal questions that came through? Because if I missed anything, I want to make sure I circle back to those folks with answers. That's number one. Number two, can you please send the survey link to everyone? And before everyone zooms off, know that we use your survey, the results of our survey, to improve the quality of our meetings and to be able to demonstrate, if we can, through data, that these meetings matter and are making a difference in our community, so that we can go back and ask for more money through grants. So it's with good reasons that we ask you to fill out the survey link that Brandon just sent to everyone. For those of you who don't have the time to do it now, within the next 48 hours, you will be sent that survey link and be asked to fill it out. Know that if you know anyone who wants to watch this meeting again, it has been videotaped and will be made available on YouTube and on our website. And just to Bridget and Ellie, you guys are awesome. Thank you so much for doing this. Thank you to board member Molly Welch Marahar, who came up with this idea and said, look, we got these board members that can educate us on what's going on. Let's bring them on. And I'm thankful she brought that up. So you guys, there's a lot of good information here. Hope you're taking it in. Ellie, I don't know, with some of that other information, I can broadcast it to the universe if you get it to me through our email blast. And with that, everyone, just thank you so much for participating, okay? You guys take care.